So last night during Raw, even though this wasn't seen on camera, well, live anyway, there was footage that got leaked online. Basically, people are taking pictures and video of a fan running towards Seth Rollins. Yeah. And the way this fan did it was very weird. It's like, it's hard to describe without showing it, but I don't want to show it or anything. But what happened is, I'll link it if I can find it. I'll link it. But what happens is this guy runs out of the crowd, doesn't jump the he jumps the barricade, but he jumps it, and he runs across the stage, right? He runs across the stage into the entranceway, the walkway, and he tackles down Seth Rollins. Now, Seth held the guy by his head, basically, grabbed the guy as soon as he, came right towards him to try to take him down. He kind of grabbed him to defend himself until security got there. And Seth, he kind of fought him off a little bit, but not much, because you had security rush right down to get the guy off. And, this brought up, once again, the question of why. Why do fans do this? Why are fans so, I wouldn't say daring. I would say, I'll put it this way. Why are fans so convinced that just because you have wrestling companies, sports entertainment companies coming out and saying, hey, what we do is a performance and everything. What we do is a performance. Why do they think that gives them pretty much an idea of, ooh, they're not really that tough, they're just performers? Okay, do. Why does that give them the thought process of, hey, I could take this guy or this gal on because they're not as tough as they say they are. They're just performers. And I could show them I'm tougher. Do. Why do that? Why? It's not a smart move. These men and these women in wrestling, whether it's sports entertainment wrestling like WWE, whether its main focus is in-ring wrestling like AEW and Impact and New Japan, these men and women are actual combaters, if you will. They're combat fighters. They're athletes. They have backgrounds in judo. They have backgrounds in MMA. MMA training, not the actual sport. Well, some of them do, but you get the idea. They have, athletic background, if you will. The thing is, I don't get why some people feel that they could just go and tackle down a man or a woman, depending on whether or not it's a female fan or a male fan. Why they think, honestly, it makes them a tough guy or a tough gal, or they feel that if they do this, they're going to get the moment in the sun. They're going to get the 15 minutes of fame. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And then on top of that, it seems, ladies and gentlemen, that the guy basically may have been released. Yeah, he was, taken into custody by the NYPD, handed over to them, and taken to the police station. But it looks like he was able to make bail, or he was released, because apparently he put out a video explaining his actions. And this video pretty much showed to a lot of folks, this guy may not be all there in the cabeza. Yeah, he may not be all there in the cabeza, because of what he did. But you know what? This here is just another prime example of, just because you bought a ticket to an event, and as Alex Hicks said when he talked about it, these tickets are not cheap. They've not been cheap since the day I got a second row ticket to New Year's Revolution in Kansas City in 2007, and they're definitely not cheap now. So if you're going to spend hundreds of dollars, $50, $80 on a decent seat to watch and view the show and, have yourself entertained, whether you like what's being produced or you don't like what's being produced, that doesn't give you the right to say, well, I paid my money, I'm going to do what I want. it doesn't give you that right to just jump over a barricade and be like, hey, I'm going to tackle Seth Rollins. Boom, boom, boom. See? I'm tougher than the guy. Da, 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 da. It doesn't give you that right. The same way it doesn't give people a freaking right to jump over the guardrails or the barricades at, sporting events like NBA games or NFL games or MLB games or college games. It doesn't give you that right to just go out there and run around and act like you can do whatever you want or strip naked just because you want attention or somebody dared you. It doesn't give you that right. Alright? When you buy a ticket to go have yourself entertained, you go there to be entertained. You don't go there because you think, ooh, this ticket, it's ultimate power. I can do whatever I want. It doesn't give you that right. It doesn't give you that right. It's like when you go to a movie, a drive-in movie, in theater movie, when you buy a ticket, just because you bought that ticket, it doesn't mean you can just run around during the movie in front of maybe a sold-out theater or a sold-out drive-in who's trying to enjoy themselves watching this film. It doesn't give you the right to go, yee, I'm going to run around strip naked. Or it doesn't give you the right at the drive-in to turn up the sound on your radio with your big booming speakers with the windows down and everything and party and distract people, go like, yeah, 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 yeah. It doesn't give you that right. Okay? The reason these tickets are sold for you to purchase is to allow yourselves to be entertained, to take a break from reality. That is why they are there. They're not there because it gives you that ultimate power of I can do whatever the hell I want. They are there so you could take yourself away from the stress of real life. That's why they're there. They're not there just because you believe it gives you that ultimate freedom. It doesn't. It doesn't. And again, when it comes to wrestling, this is just another example of people believing that. I mean, how many times have we seen this? We saw it, speaking of Seth Rollins, one time we saw it with Seth, a fan decided, I'm going to put myself in a Shield-like outfit and walk next to him as he's going towards the ring. It's like, no, that doesn't give you the right. It doesn't give you the right. Another good example is when somebody decided, I'm going to jump the barricade, jump into the ring during the Eddie Guerrero RVD ladder match, push the ladder shake the ladder, push it a little bit, jump up and down, go there, yay, I did it, see, I'm a star. No. It doesn't give you that right. It doesn't. And you can come up, and for those people that do these kind of things, they can come up with all the excuses they want to justify what they do. It's not right. It's still not right. Period. It's not right. And I know one of the major reasons or excuses people will, trot out, nowadays is the fact that because the wrestling landscape has changed so drastically in the past several years that a lot of these people that do these, incidences, not just at WWE but at other wrestling events, major, minor, or whatever, that the reason they do this is because of the fact that you got companies like AEW, being what they want it, being what a lot of these fans want, all the companies to be. Or they look at something like GCW and they're like, GCW is what wrestling companies like WWE and AEW should be, and this and that. It's because you have such a drastically different landscape in pro wrestling. One of the major excuses is people will say that these are people that are probably fans of these other promotions just by the fact that maybe you see the name of the promotion on their shirt, or they're more outspoken in a positive way about a certain promotion, that they're basically they're at fault for doing these kind of things, or making these people perpetrate these kind of things at WWE events, at AEW events, at Impact events, at any wrestling event, all because they want to defend and prove that our wrestling, our style of pro wrestling is better than yours. Ha ha ha! And no, that is a dumb excuse. And even if that excuse has legitimacy to it, again, like I said earlier, it's still not a reason. It's still not a reason to jump the freaking barriers, run across the stage and tackle somebody as they're trying to go up the ramp, so they can go to the back and shower. Well, guess what? Their wife, their mother of their child, who also is a wrestler, who is a current champion, is getting ready to come out for her moment, but then has to basically put her belt down, get herself on standby, just in case she has to tackle the damn moron for attacking her husband. You see, it's it's the fact that we're in this different landscape to where, legitimately or not legitimately, the excuse is going to be used. The reason a lot of these fans are doing these kind of things, more so at WWE events and some other places, is because of the effect AEW, GCW, and others are having. That they look at AEW and AEW promoting that, oh, we're about pro wrestling. To some people, that would be a reason for some fan like this guy to probably come down, tackle Seth Rollins and everything, because, in their minds, they're going like, yeah, I'm defending AEW Pro Wrestling against the WWE. No, that's not a good reason. That's not a legit excuse, even if it is. And the same with GCW. What is this? Some people might say, well, what if this guy was, acting, out of what he thought was defense for GCW? Still, not an excuse. And even if this guy said, what he did in his video, because he, like I said earlier, he put a video out acknowledging what he did, but then explaining that the reason he did it is because he thought the person on social media, on Twitter, was the actual Seth Rollins, and it wasn't. It's still not an excuse. Whether you have a mental disability, ADHD, whatever the case may be, you still should honestly double check your facts. You should double check your facts of whether or not this is the real deal or it's a faker. It's just one of those situations to where, double, triple, quadruple check your facts before you go and attempt to do something. Whether it's something that you feel is in the right, or you feel that, hey, I'm going to be at the event anyway, I have the power to do what I want, and it's not in the right. It's, whether or not the person that tweeted that you thought was that person was the person on Twitter or social media, saying something to you and everything, doesn't mean you should, bulk up and say, okay, I'm going to go take this guy out as the next time they come to town. No, it still doesn't give you an excuse whether or not the person on social media that was calling you out was the real, deal or not. In this case, it wasn't. The fact is, folks, it doesn't matter if it's pro wrestling, it doesn't matter if it's mixed martial arts, Lord have pity on the soul of people that Lord have pity on the souls that attempt to do that. It doesn't matter if it's wrestling, mixed martial arts, MLB pro baseball, NFL pro football, NBA pro basketball, WNBA pro basketball, NHL, soccer, college. It doesn't matter. You do not have the right. You, my friends, do not have the right, to jump the barricades, to get onto the parquet floor, to run onto the field, to jump the cage walls at an MMA event. And again, Lord help the souls that do that. You do not have the right to do it. What you need to do is sit in your seat, eat, and enjoy the event you came to enjoy. You do not have the right to do more than that. Well, you do have the right to go get something for the concession stands, buy some souvenirs, merchandise, whatever. That's all cool. But just because you have that ticket to said event doesn't mean it gives you the right. It doesn't mean it gives you the right to believe you can do whatever the hell you want. Because it doesn't. It doesn't. And what it mainly leads to at times is you being permanently banned from whatever area you did this at. And for this guy, whether or not he was duped into believing one thing or not, believing whether or not the person he was talking to was the real Seth Rollins, Tyler Black, or was a false one, doesn't matter. It doesn't give you the reasoning to do what you did. And whether or not people want to come out and say, oh, well, he did it because maybe he's an AEW fan. He was defending AEW, or he was a GCW fan. It doesn't matter what the excuse or reasoning was. It's still not right to do. It's still not right. And, and let me say this as well. Let me say this in conclusion as well. I talk about how drastic the wrestling landscape has changed in the past several years. Solomonster, Jason Solomon, recently did a video clip, or recently uploaded a video clip on his channel from his recent podcast. And it was a little bit of a 5 to 6 minute rant. And he talked about how a fan on his Twitter account basically told him, yeah, you don't have the right to say anything bad about AEW. Just because Solomonster said he didn't enjoy this past Friday's edition of Rampage, as much as he normally would enjoy an edition of Rampage, this one person comes out and says, yeah, you don't have the right to say anything bad about it because it's built up enough goodwill. Nothing but good things should be said about it. And let me just tell you this. Jason went off on this guy on his podcast and in this video clip. He went off on him because, Jason's right. How dare you tell me what I can and cannot say on my Twitter account? Because all Jason's doing is giving an honest opinion. He's saying, look, I love Rampage, but this edition of Rampage I didn't particularly care for. And he has a right to say that. And you know what? AEW, All Elite Wrestling, is not all, it's not all sweet roses and wine and picture perfect fields and all that. The glorious golden gates of heaven opening up to wrestling fans and all that. It's not as perfect as a lot of people make it out to be. I mean, yeah, they do some things a lot better than other promotions like WWE, and Impact to an extent, and even New Japan, and GCW. Yeah, I'll give them that. But again, they're not all wine. They're not all Ryan and Roses. That's the example I was trying to use. The verbal example. They're not all wine and roses. They've made mistakes. They still make mistakes. When it comes to certain things, like the Matt Hardy Sammy Guevara deal last year, or the filming of the angle of Chris Jericho falling off the cell at Blood and Guts. Yes, or the ending to the exploding death match between Omega and Moxley. They're not all wine and roses. They're not perfect. So people shouldn't come out and say these kind of things, to anybody. That wants to give an honest opinion about how they felt about a certain episode of Rampage or Dynamite, or even a certain segment or a few segments here and there, in what could be an overall good show. When a person comes out and says those kind of things, they have an opinion to say that. They have a right to say that. And, you shouldn't, tell that person, especially on their Twitter account or their Facebook page, hey, you don't have a right to say that, because they, basically what I'm trying to say is, let me get some coffee here, because I'm rambling a lot here. There we go. But like I said, you shouldn't come out and tell somebody, elsewise. You shouldn't try to force somebody to, agree with your viewpoints. I mean, yeah, I'll give AEW credit that they have built up enough positiveness that you could rarely say anything negative about them. But again, they're not all wine and roses. They have the negatives. They have the cons. They have the cons and everything. Thankfully, the pros outweigh those cons more so than, you see with WWE or any other promotion. So for AEW fans, drones, if you will, diehards, to come out and say you can't say anything bad about the company, that is stupid in its own right to say. That is stupid in its own right to say. And it shows, without a shadow of a doubt, that the wrestling world has changed drastically, because a lot of these people that come out and say, oh, you shouldn't say anything bad about AEW, or you can't say anything bad about WWE, you can't say anything bad about New Japan, GCW, Impact, PWG, AAA. For a lot of these fans that come out and say those kind of things, let me reference you back to the mid-90s. The early to mid-90s. Alright? Let me reference you to the early to mid-90s to early 2000s. You go back there. You go back to that time period in wrestling, when it was at one of its hardest peaks, period. And you tell me what you see. You tell me what you see. Because you know what I see? You know what I see? You know what I remember being part of? A war. A war very similar to this, to where we would tell friends and family, you can't say this about WCW. You can't say this about ECW. You can't say this about WWF. All because we felt one was better than the other. Or we felt one couldn't do, any wrong. Because they had built up so much goodwill. They'd done so much great stuff. And looking back on it now, we've come to realize that yes, even though one, in our opinion, may have been better and superior in some areas than the others, it doesn't mean they were all Ryan and Roses. WCW made a lot of mistakes even at the hardest peak. WWF made a lot of mistakes even at the hottest peak. So did ECW. It doesn't mean either one of those three promotions was better than the other. Doesn't mean either one of those promotions was wine and roses. Instead, they had the flaws. They had the cons to go along with the pros. They had the positives and the negatives. It doesn't mean one was better than the other. To the point that you tell somebody, oh, you have the right to tell somebody, your viewpoints on saying you didn't like that edition of Nitro is completely false. WCW has done enough right now that you shouldn't speak ill of them. No. There were mistakes on Nitro and Thunder and Saturday Night that WCW got called out on. And, for the fact that nowadays these new generation of fans don't realize that we've been there, done that, and everything, and seen it, for them to tell someone like Jason Solomonster, that, hey, you don't have the right to say anything bad about AEW because they've built up enough goodwill. Yeah, they've done a lot of good positive stuff. It doesn't mean they're not without the negatives, and the negatives are the ones I just pointed out. And by the way, you're trying to contradict somebody that's been a wrestling fan as long as I've been a fan. That's like trying to contradict Brian Alvarez. That's trying to contradict someone like Dave Meltzer. That's trying to contradict someone like the Slag Daddy, Jeff Siegel, and all that. These are people that have been fans as long as I have. They've been fans of the 80s and the 90s and all that. They've seen it all as fans. So to try to contradict somebody like myself, or Solomon, or Slag Daddy, or Alvarez, don't. Just don't. If we want to come out and say, we didn't like this particular episode of Rampage, or we didn't particularly like this episode of Dynamite, or we felt that the ending to Revolution earlier this year fell completely flat and made AEW look bad on that one occasion, we have the right to say that. We have the right to say that because honestly, the truth is we've been there and done that as wrestling fans for a lot longer than a lot of other fans out there. Mostly, and I say this with all due respect, mostly the AEW diehards and drones, as some people would call them. So for anybody, whether you are a diehard of WWE, AEW, Impact, New Japan, whatever, for you to come out and tell somebody like Jason Solomon, myself, Brian Alvarez, OTR Centros, Jeff Siegel, for you to come out and tell us otherwise, JD from NY206 too, for you to come out and tell us otherwise is completely it's completely idiotic. It's completely immature, I should say. Let me take back the idiotic part, but completely immature and wrong. Look, everybody has a right to their opinions, okay? But for you, somebody that thinks, oh, my opinion is you shouldn't say anything bad, keep that opinion to yourself. That's all I'm going to say. But I just wanted to come on here, give you my thoughts on what happened last night with a fan attacking Seth Rollins and everything, give you my thoughts overall on that, as well as kind of, add in my thoughts on, fans trying to contradict other fans, especially fans that have been fans for a lot longer than them, about whether or not, they should say things negative or positive about a certain product in a show of that product. Let me know what your thoughts are down below. Comment if you like the video, if you will, live chat during the premiere. Check out the Teespring store, especially with the holidays coming up. And also check me out at BW Rose's Discussions on all your favorite audio podcast locations except for Pandora. Also check me out at BW Roses on VENMO for some content you can't get anywhere else, especially if it's copyrighted and blocked worldwide here on YouTube. Also, check me out at patreon.com/BW Roses for $1, $3 tiers. Excuse me there. And also check me out at Venmo if you want to help donate to that area, financially there as well. But until next time, guys, take care. Let me know what your thoughts are overall. And I am out. I will talk to y'all later.